In recent months, the reptile hobby has been hyped for the introduction of some new national level reptile shows. Whether it is the All-American reptile shows both in Denver, Charlotte, and I think they have some more locations coming soon, or the Southeast Reptile Expo in Atlanta, there are massive things going on in the reptile hobby that has a lot of people pumped. But not everybody is happy about these new shows coming onto the scene and the momentum that they have. So for this week's episode, we're going to be talking about one of them, and that is Bob Vu's Southeast Reptile Expo and a little bit of the drama that's surrounding this specific show. My name's Steven with Leviathan Snakes, and let's get to it. The American Southeast is home to one of the biggest reptile shows in the world with the Daytona National Reptile Breeder Expo. But when you are not looking at Daytona, which occurs during August, which when it comes to ball pythons is a little early in the hatchling season, there are not very many big shows in the American Southeast. There are tons of local shows that do really, really well, but for pretty much as long as we've been in the hobby, there had been a gap in the American Southeast. And one of the perfect metro areas is Atlanta. It has such a big airport that makes it easy for people to fly into, and it has such a big population that it can draw a lot of people in for any given reptile show. So a couple years back, the Reptilian Nation reptile shows added another location. And when they did this, they added Atlanta. And I was so freaking excited about this. We went to the very first one and it was an amazing show. There was a ton of people through the door and there was this vibe, this energy that felt that maybe this could be another national level show. So the next year came up, and again, it did really, really well, and we were able actually to vend it last year, and we did awesome. We only had one table, but we were able to sell probably about 20-ish animals that were mostly pet level stuff, but we are not complaining in the slightest about that. So with this, a lot of people really, really were excited about this Atlanta Reptilian Nation reptile show. For us personally, after we had vended it, we reached out to Reptilian Nation in order to see when they were going to be coming back because we were so excited to get signed up for the next show. But when we ended up getting a reply from them back in December of 2023, they let us know very professionally that they did not have any plans on coming back to Atlanta at that point in time. Needless to say, we were pretty bummed about this, and a lot of other people in our area were also pretty bummed because it was a really, really good show. I would guesstimate, I don't actually know, but there was probably about 10 to 15,000 people that would come through the door on these Reptilian Nation shows, and it was an amazing crowd. Again, when we vended it, not only did we do well, but just about everybody seemed to do well at that show in Atlanta in 2023. Fast forward a little bit, and we were with Bob before the March Tinley, and we were filming with Bob for the Redline Road Trip documentary series. And while we were there, I don't think that we were recording or anything like that, but we talked about how much of a bummer it was that Reptilian Nation wasn't coming back to Atlanta. And Atlanta is Bob's hometown. Like, it might be the closest big metro hub for us, but Bob lives right outside of Atlanta. So the fact that there was such a good show in Atlanta and then they weren't coming back was a really big bummer for him, and he wanted to make sure that his hometown had a show of that caliber, and he wasn't willing to accept the fact that Reptilian Nation wasn't coming back. So at that point in time, he actually talked to us about his idea of doing his own show, and we thought that that would be super, super cool, and we had let him know then that anything that he needed, let us know, and we would be glad to help him out in order to make an amazing show in the Atlanta area. Moving forward a few months, and Bob ended up announcing the Southeast Reptile Expo. And when he announced this, a lot of people were really, really excited because, again, if one person can put on a show that is going to be national level and really, really help out the reptile community, it's going to be Bob Vu. So Bob ended up investing a ton of money already months beforehand into marketing this show, and he was putting up social media ads, he was putting up digital ads, they had gotten billboards, they got flyers, they got yard signs, they did a lot of stuff to show how invested they were in order to making this a successful event. And in addition to this, he did a really good job with getting different vendors, like really big name vendors, specifically in the ball python world. So not only is he going to be vending it with Bob's Balls, but also a Ball Python Shed and Hulker's Herps. And he was able to get Convo, who is also local to the Atlanta area, to vend the show as well. And I think that this is absolutely huge because the Convo team doesn't really vend any shows outside of Tinley Park, NARBC. So the fact that they are vending this show in Atlanta means that for all of the people who watch them on YouTube and don't have an opportunity to see them in person because they can't travel all the way to Illinois just to see them, they now have an opportunity to meet them in person and really engage with some of the top people in the entire reptile hobby. So all of this together, it got people really excited, and a lot of people started making plans to travel into it, and a lot of people started really wanting to get into this show. In addition to having the support from a lot of the top people in the ball python breeding hobby, Bob also got the support of some other of the industry leaders such as Morph Market and Redline Shipping, and specifically for Morph Market, they ended up sponsoring the Southeast Reptile Expo. And this is where we are starting to get into the realm of the actual controversy that we are going to be talking about today. Roughly a month or so after Bob had announced the Southeast Reptile Expo and started promoting it, Darian of Morph Market posted a string of text messages that he had with the owner of Reptilian Nation. And there's lots of various different things, and I'm not going to dive into everything now, but I am going to link to the Facebook post below, so that way if you want to go check it out for yourself, you are more than welcome. But realistically, what I want to talk about in regards to this video is that Reptilian Nation was upset with Darian for supporting their competition. And when Darian ended up inquiring on what do they mean by that, and they said that it was Bob's show that they were supporting because Morph Market was a sponsor of it. And Darian replied that I thought you weren't coming back to Atlanta, and Reptilian Nation said that that wasn't true, that they never said that they weren't coming back to Atlanta. But the problem with this is that Reptilian Nation had told people that they were not coming back to Atlanta. In fact, they told us in an email that they weren't coming back, and we weren't the only ones, because in the comments on the Facebook thread, a lot of people started posting screenshots of Reptilian Nation saying they had no plans to come back to Atlanta. So between this created a back and forth between Morph Market, or at least Darian of Morph Market, and the owner of Reptilian Nation, and it kind of spiraled or maybe blew out of control. I don't know if it's maybe out of control, but essentially it got a lot of attention. And fairly shortly after this whole exchange happened on Facebook, Reptilian Nation put on their website that they were doing an Atlanta show. But at first, they didn't have a location and they didn't have exact dates. And then a little bit afterwards, they had the dates and they didn't have a location yet, but the dates were the exact same weekend as Bob's show, the Southeast Reptile Expo. And then finally, they end up putting in a location for their show. But again, it's the very same weekend that Bob is having the Southeast Reptile Expo. So, with this, there is lots of different things that are going on, but I believe that it's pretty obvious that Reptilian Nation ended up getting upset, whether this was specifically from Bob doing the show or this was through the exchange with Darian, but ultimately it made them want to do a show in Atlanta as well, even though they had told multiple different people for months beforehand that they weren't going to be coming back to Atlanta. And this itself isn't necessarily a problem. While I do think that from a vending and community aspect, it's not really good to have one specific geographic area oversaturated with shows, because it takes away a little bit of the event of each individual show if you know that you can just go to another one the very next weekend. So I personally like it when one specific geographic area has about one show every 3 or 4 months or so. So let's say that Reptilian Nation had decided that they wanted to come back to Atlanta, but at this point in time, Bob had already been promoting for at least a month that he was doing the Southeast Reptile Expo and the dates that it was going on. So in this specific situation, I think that had Reptilian Nation came back to Atlanta, but they did it in the spring or in the winter, that would have been completely fine because it would allow Bob to do his show and wait a couple months, and everybody who's in that area may also want to go out to another show in the winter or the springtime. But by doing it on the exact same weekend, I think that it very obviously shows that they are simply wanting to make Bob's show less successful so that way they can draw away some of the audience that might have gone to Bob's show. And if it gets to the point where it isn't financially viable for Bob to do the show because not enough people came to his show because they get confused when they see ads for a reptile show in Atlanta and one of the ads are for him with the Southeast Reptile Expo and the other is for Reptilian Nation, they might not know which one to go to and therefore they go to one and they don't think to go to the other because they don't realize that there's two separate shows in the same place. If the show isn't economically viable for Bob, it's very likely that Bob may end up not being able to do the show again in the future. And in my opinion, this feels honestly fairly petty. And again, I don't know if this is because Bob is doing a show in Atlanta, even though Reptilian Nation said they weren't coming back to it, or if it is pettiness out of the argument with Darian on Facebook. But either way, it feels very similar to the bullying and toxicity that was described within the reptile hobby previous to COVID. And I think that this type of thing isn't something that is going to promote a strong, healthy hobby and is going to grow it for future generations. Now, obviously we are biased because we love Bob and he has been nothing but welcoming, and he probably was the very first, if not one of the very first, big people in the hobby that welcomed us into it. And I know that there are so many people in the reptile hobby who truly appreciate how kind and welcoming Bob is, and I want to make sure that anything that Bob does is super, super successful. And with this specific show, I definitely want to make sure that it is a massive success, not only for Bob, but for the entire reptile hobby. If we can have more absolutely amazing shows throughout the nation, it gives more people an opportunity to get in and meet the people that they see on YouTube or that they have bought animals from on Morph Market. And overall, I think that it is critical to support anything that has the chance to grow the hobby and make our entire industry stronger. In addition, it is undeniable that Reptilian Nation has been amazing at drawing in crowds and getting people to go to their shows, and I hope that they keep doing this. But I also hope that if in the future they are going to plan more shows in Atlanta, that they don't try to do it to bully somebody else out of the market, and instead they understand that there's plenty of room for everybody to go around and that they can 100% coexist in the same place. Quick plug, because next Wednesday, August 28th, Bob Vu is going to be on Partho with Courtney and Molly, and they are going to be talking about the Southeast Reptile Expo, and you are not going to want to miss it. Needless to say, we are so excited for the Southeast Reptile Expo, and we cannot wait for September 14th and 15th. But no matter what, whoever you support, we highly recommend that you help promote it, whether you are a guest, whether you are a vendor. Just simply sharing posts that these shows are making about the event will help grow the hobby, and it will make it a stronger place for everybody in the years to come. So we hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next week.